Greetings from the Witch House, Doctor Gallow here. Tonight's tale of terror supposes that one particular famous horror movie which enjoys its 100th year in 2022 was funded by the real-life version of its subject, a vampire vanity project, if you will. Hopefully, you won't think it sucks. When the realization came, it had almost come as a surprise that another 100 years had passed, but the feeling withered back to nothing before it had even begun. One more century was nothing to the creature after watching so many end. Its legacy, however, was everything. Pride was its final sin, and the last of its humanity. It understood that it would never again be a man, but a man's pride remained, stinging its insides and spurring it to leave its mark on the world, over and over. That pride was the one part of its mortality that did not die with its old life. That stubborn little barb had driven it, finally, from the safety of its home, and across the sea. It was no stranger to travelling by ship. One particular crossing had been documented in a book a little over 100 years earlier, and the account was ghoulishly accurate. The final version of the commission, published just before the turn of the century, had been a collection of truths, half-truths and falsehoods. It had directed the Irishman to take some artistic license, lest the world learn that its existence was no mere fiction. The creature had gone to ground again shortly after the book's success, retreating back to the Carpathian cavern that served as its vast resting tomb, with only a handful of its faithful on hand to feed and bring it news of the world beyond the mountains. A familiar paranoia had set in that it knew to trust. Its instinct whispered that someone would decipher the truths of the novel and seek it out, intent on its destruction. It knew well enough, however, that time would pass, and so would the lives of anyone who suspected there was more to the tale. It needed only to wait, and it had the patience of the dead. Then, in the blink of an eye, came news of a new medium taking the world by storm, attracting all the most fashionable, talented darlings as moth to a flame, and with it came a new way for the creature to immortalize itself once again. Soon it was in Germany. German actors had been cast and another German hired to make what would become a loosely adapted moving picture of the book, which was, of course, a loose adaptation of actual events in the first place. The cast and crew had all been paid handsomely by one of its faithful, while the creature had watched developments from the shadows. It had accumulated massive wealth during its time on Earth, and so making the film at any cost, as its pride demanded, was at no real cost at all. There was no paranoia this time, only wonderment. It had lived many lifetimes and witnessed many wonderful and curious things, but not one moment had compared to watching that suitably grotesque little man up there on the screen, fanged, bald-headed, pointy-eared, and clawed, moving and alive in a way that it would never see itself reflected in any mirror. The movie went on to become greatly and widely renowned. A masterpiece, they said. The thing went back to its cave tomb and finally, for the first time in its undeath, knew contentment, sleeping, feeding and basking in its self-absorbed glory for another 100 years. Other films of the vampire came with time, of interviews and eternal children in the snow, of African princes and dead towns named of Jerusalem, and with each, its dangerous truths were diluted a little more. Then the whispers came across the night. It heard them as it slumbered and watched the dreams of men. Something familiar on the edge of a mind far, far away. It stretched farther, probing. There was trepidation and excitement. There was pride. And then it saw itself in this man's dream, and recoiled instantly back to its body. The creature awoke, defying nature as it rose, stiff-bodied, to its feet like a statue toppled in reverse. The closest of its faithful rose sharply too, and went to attend his master, but was rewarded only with an abrupt and meaningless death, as it grabbed his face in the elongated fingers of one hand, and squeezed until it burst. Another of its faithful replaced the dead one by its side and vowed to discover the truth of her master's fears. She did not die when she returned to relay the news, though the news was dire. The film, its film, was going to be made again. They were calling it a reimagining. It would be contemporary. No castles, no wolves, no Greta. The lead had made his name in romantic comedies and was beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, a chiseled chunk of flesh, and an idiot with the acting prowess of a duck. The one they called the director had never even made a film. He had only made something called music videos. The creature watched one of his creations, and it was then that she died, beheaded in a fit of pique, quickly replaced with another eager slave. Now it travelled the foreign lands once more. It lurked and squirmed its way with the rats beneath the city of angels towards its prey, through water and rahat and other rotten things. These sewers reminded it of its own tunnels, among the Carpathians, and, with brief sadness, of London. It separated itself into the hive, and the rats made their way up the slimy bricks and found openings, squashing themselves to sausages to traverse small pipes, and crushing one another against metal to crash, bloodily, through vents. Up they went, squeezing through holes and ducts until they arrived, vomited from the penthouse toilets, in a greasy, fetid brown tide. There were 2 humans in the dwelling, it sensed as it squelched back to a naked 2-legged thing. It could smell their blood as it walked down the hallway. Their dual pulses throbbed in his ear arousingly. The first, a girl, lay naked in one of the rooms as it passed the open door. Empty bottles lay on the rug beside the bed. She was breathing, but her heart beat slowly, and she did not dream. Unconscious, it realized. With a tiny movement of its head, it signaled the rats, who engulfed her. She didn't even move. It arrived in the main room and saw the director. He was leaning over a glass table and sucking up powder into his nose with some sort of tube. It looked around and, to its horror, saw a picture of itself on the wall. Well, a picture of the German actor who had played it so well. It was an advertisement for its own film. It was a reproduction, it noted. A fake. Like this imbecile's reimagining of its magnum opus. The idiot looked up, wide-eyed. "Shit," he said, then stood up, dropping its little tube into the mound of powder on the table with a puff. "Shit, look at you." It looked back at him, nonplussed. It was not accustomed to such lack of fear, having terrified countless generations. "I saw the concept art for that scene, the throwback to the OG with the ears and the long claws and shit, but I didn't think they would do the full bodysuit." He walked up to the monster before him, oblivious. "It's like a 3-second shot. I can't believe they didn't just CGI it up. Shame we couldn't do it for the whole thing, I guess, but hey, who wants to look at a bald little rat dude when they could be looking at our pretty boy, right?" He walked past it and grabbed a bottle of something amber from a counter and poured it into a crystal glass before returning and standing before it once more. He poked it on the shoulder. "Shit, that's cold. How did they do that? Is that some method shit? You know the people in the theater, they can't feel your temperature, right? Why would—" His voice trailed off as he glanced away from it, and saw himself in the apartment window, which showed him that he was completely alone. He turned to check the glass on the other side of the room and was again looking at himself, and nothing more. The director let go of the glass and tried to step away, but it embraced him with its cold arms and enfolded him into the leathery membranes under its arms. It breathed its death into his mouth, and it watched his eyes pale, then punctured his neck with its 2 jagged front teeth. It drained him quickly and let the near weightless husk crumple onto the rug. Then It walked to the window and looked out at the city beyond, where hundreds of thousands lived their lives, among them its enemies. The producers, the actors, the men who'd owned the studio, the one who'd written this new monstrosity in the first place. It knew where to find all of them. With a gesture, the window shattered outward, and the creature exploded with it into the air as bats, whirling and squealing in a black tornado through the darkness towards its next destination. It was going to be a long and very bloody night.